Yo, yo, yo. What is up, interwebs? Hey, thanks for hanging out with me. I'm Jeremy. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm the Jer in Wellness with Jer. Thanks for stopping by and checking out my channel today. We're going to talk about current events. Is always a good topic and super fun, and nothing ever goes wrong because the world's a wonderful place to be alive. This fucking timeline is driving me bonkers. I'm not alone in that. I'm just in a little bit of a flip a table mood. That's a funny Bible joke. It'll make more sense when the episode's over. So we're going to talk about Stephen Colbert, whom I love and adore on a deep level, and his interview with James Talarico. And not that I'm weighing in on who you should vote for. I don't even know if this will go out. I think the Senate race is in a couple weeks. Because I'm not well informed on Talarico or Jasmine Crockett's policies, although I did watch some of their debate. Not really weighing in on who to vote, but just sort of using the Talarico Colbert moment in time to highlight that, like, we are not having a conversation about revolution. And the circle jerk that is progressive Christianity isn't going to be the way that we change things here in America, although it may lead to short-term voting success. And like, that's a bummer. Better than having a Republican, you know. But if we're going to dismantle some of the systems that have allowed the culture of abuse, of pedophilia, of corporate capture and unfettered greed, like, progressive Christianity doesn't get us there. And one Presbyterian and one Catholic talking about speaking truth to power is ironic on a level that I think Colbert would appreciate if he wasn't the Catholic in that. So yeah, if you haven't seen it, if you don't know what I'm talking about, James Talarico is a state rep from Texas. He is running for Texas Senate, and he's up against Jasmine Crockett, who has been also a state rep for Texas. And I think Crockett is the more progressive candidate and is somebody who's like a leftist and is like, there's not a left enough political party for me. I think Crockett speaks a little bit more in the terms that I would use than Talarico does. And Talarico does a really nice job of sort of summarizing some of the systemic issues that are causing harm in our country and things that he would do differently about them. And in a way that I think Talarico specifically wants to go back to the way it was and not really change our system. And again, I mean, talking about a politician who's running a race in Texas, they're probably saying some things, doing some things, holding some stances that are going to have wide electoral appeal, because I do think Jasmine Crockett would generally agree with abolishing ICE. And in their debate, neither Crockett nor Talarico came out and said those words, because again, they're actively campaigning, and they're campaigning in Texas. I'm aware of that context. Colbert is on a Zero Fucks Given tour, which is a wonder to behold. I know Stephen Colbert as Chuck Noblet, the closeted gay history teacher from Strangers with Candy, which is not a good TV show that you should watch in 2026. But it was a formative part of my teenage years with my friends who were countercultural in a way that didn't have a lot of space, and we thought it was really funny. We were good kids who also didn't like being good kids. Is maybe how I would reflect on that. So Strangers with Candy holds a special place in my heart. I quote it regularly. I can hear Stephen Colbert as Chuck Noblet yelling, "Shut your dirty little mouth," at a kid who asks him where his permission slip is, and talking about poetry regarding Hiroshima. And like, I quote that show a lot more than it probably deserves. So I've liked Colbert for a long time. I watched Exit 57, which is like I think, one episode of that show because I like Stephen Colbert. And again, as an undiagnosed ADHD person, when I found somebody who I liked, I watched all their stuff. A lot of the Colbert Report was around when I was late high school, early college, and my college career. It was on for a long time. And so, for millennials who were raised evangelical Christian and then went off to college, I think for a lot of people, Colbert and Jon Stewart, The Daily Show, Colbert's correspondence on that, and then his spinoff to being the Colbert Report as a satirical right-wing talking head was probably where a lot of people went from like Republican coded or like raised Republican to libertarian, which is what happens in college, to maybe some version of liberal and like leftist. And I missed that boat. I did where Talarico is now, which was the progressive Christian thing. So again, I'm not going to say that satire and some of the Colbert Report satirizing right-wing talking points wasn't useful for me at that point in my life. Again, it was a lot of like me seeing some of the early flaws in Christianity, but Colbert is still publicly like proudly Catholic. And it's a weird thing given his other politics. And yet, as a religious trauma therapist, if you were wondering what my tie-in, hey, thanks for watching the first 6 minutes of the video. If you're wondering what my tie-in is to get into on this topic, because I don't want to do current events. Ugh. No, I don't like it. But I think so many of the current events do make people's mental health worse. We are in sort of a crazy making time in what we're seeing is like so preposterous, and then having to act like it's normal is crazy making. The idea that we can't publicly agree that Nazis were bad people and people who espouse Nazi ideology now are also bad is like crazy, right? Like, that's wild. It's insane to have Epstein's best friend as president. That's bad. That's bad. To have the person who's running the investigation be the person who was the AG in Florida when Epstein was doing a lot of the bad stuff that he did, which was raping children with his best friend, Donald Trump, and a bunch of other billionaires, right? Like, how many billionaires are in the world? Like 4,000 or something like that. And 1,000 of them are in the Epstein files. Those numbers might be off, but those numbers definitely are off. That was hyperbole. But it's like a shocking amount, right? Like it's a strong percentage. QAnon was right for all of the wrong reasons. It's like a shocking world to be alive in. That's also hyperbole. I don't think QAnon was right. We're off track here. Stephen Colbert as Chuck Noblet puts my brain in a silly space instead of a serious one. Strangers with Candy is very funny and hasn't aged well. It wasn't appropriate at the time. That was the joke. Anyway, some great folks from like Upright Citizens Brigade are in there. Amy Sedaris is a delight. Follow her on Instagram or whatever social media you use. She's great. She's lovely as Jerry Blank. She's lovely as a human, and then also her portrayal of user, boozer, and a loser high school dropout Jerry Blank is very funny. That overbite, man. Sorry, I'll stop talking about Strangers with Candy. I don't get a lot of opportunity to bring it up, and unless you're somebody who knows me personally and I've made you watch it, you might not know about it. It's up there with like Frisky Dingo for me. Like, a lot of people know Arrested Development, and then you get into the more obscure things that I found really funny at that time of my life and quote regularly. Anyways, 10 minutes in, let's get to the interview. As like sort of on board, I'm not from Texas, right? We have Tammy Baldwin here in Wisconsin. Not great, but like could be a lot worse. And Ron Johnson. Hard to get much worse than that. Although possible here in America, but yeah. So my state representatives are not ideal, certainly not leftist. And so, I've seen Talarico have some like really concise talking points about some complex issues, which I think is a skill that not a lot of politicians have. And so like, that's nice. That's nice. That's nice for somebody who espouses Christianity, saying church and state separation is good for the church and the state. Again, it's not revolutionary of let's tax all the churches, but whatever, So I was vaguely aware of him. And then the CBS, here's the context. CBS is firing Colbert. They put Barry Weiss in charge, who's a Trump propagandist, to preemptively appease to fascism, which again, if you have studied history at all, is a bad idea and is unnecessary. Because corporations are never going to stand up to authoritarianism. Corporations have always sided with fascism because they think they can make money off of it and it won't hurt them. It often doesn't. So Colbert is sort of on like a zero fucks given. CBS tells him you can't have Talarico on because then you need to have his opponents on. It's this fair play rule. There are exceptions to it. Talk show hosts often have politicians on. Talk shows are one of the exceptions to the fair play rule. And so you don't need to give equal airtime to politicians if you're on sort of like a talk show like this. And so they said, oh, we're worried about the FCC telling us we can't do this. So Colbert put it on his YouTube channel and then said he did that on the show that aired on CBS. And so it's gotten a lot of traction. It's gotten a lot of focus. It's very much the Streisand effect, where by trying to ban or limit something, they've actually made it much more popular. Colbert, I think, handled it well, and also wouldn't have maybe done it this way if he wasn't already fired. Although John Oliver does this regularly by dunking on HBO. I mean, like, it's a running gag on Last Week Tonight with John Oliver that he makes fun of HBO pretty regularly. And so again, I think comedians of a certain caliber, people who have that name recognition and that sense of humor, certainly can get away with that without like really jeopardizing their jobs. I don't know that Oliver or Colbert are really hurting, or Jimmy Kimmel are hurting for money, where like losing their jobs is a particular concern beyond maybe the identity and having something useful to do, which is like, if you're a performer of some degree, you want to be able to perform somewhere. But like, again, these are people who are not necessarily speaking truth to power, but like, they're comedians that maybe shouldn't be who we're looking to for that. Just because George Carlin called out a bunch of stuff when he did doesn't mean that like we had societal change that followed it, because celebrities should not be our moral compasses. Put that on, maybe not my gravestone. I'm not going to have one. Someone's. Let's go to the interview. I'm not positive that YouTube will let me leave this up, so we'll play the clip and then I'll talk about the clip, and hopefully that'll make sense if it gets cut. I learned my shortcuts for this. Oh, there's the clip.
The things that's come up in some of the conversations you've had on the Texas State House floor, which some of the videos I've seen you do, and one of the things that's gotten you attention out there is that you are a Presbyterian seminarian. Presently?
Yes.
You're a seminarian?
Yes.
Okay. The right attempts to co-opt Christianity, to say that you can't believe in God, you can't believe in Christ. I think that Donald Trump might have said something like that at the National Prayer Breakfast, like you can't actually be a Christian, be a Democrat. But the religious right is largely a political movement that references spirituality, but it's a political. What is your heartfelt hand out to the people who want to use religion as a tool of political power?
Well, for 50 years, the religious right, a political movement, that is the perfect description for it. They convinced a lot of our fellow Christians that the most important issues were abortion and gay marriage. Two issues that aren't mentioned in the Bible, two issues that Jesus never talked about.
All right, I'm gonna stop there. I was on board when he said 50 years, because my brain, as somebody who talks about religious trauma, as somebody who works with religious trauma, as somebody who is hyperfixated on neo-Nazis in America and what white supremacy has looked like since World War II, not just World War II. I mean, I'm interested in the thread line of white supremacy under the guise of Christianity, which goes back to America's founding for sure. I'm not dismissing that. But when he says for 50 years, I'm like, yeah, Paul Weyrich and the Moral Majority. If you want to learn more about that, I have a video I put up a few weeks ago on the authoritarian family tree here in America, which goes into way more detail about Paul Weyrich, and also Christian identity, which is the overt white supremacist idea, which again, like, I'm not expecting a politician to talk about that stuff. They should. I wish they would. It wouldn't be popular. It wouldn't do well in our click-based society, which is why I'm doing it, because I'm not driven by that. I don't give a shit. Hello, 500 subscribers. I just hit that YouTube milestone that gets me nothing. The idea of the Moral Majority as a political movement and not a religious one is correct. Again, this was, how do we mobilize our voter base? We can't keep doing overt racism. Let's talk about abortion. And so that's going back to when that political movement co-opted the religious right to say, hey, as a voting bloc, we're going to make you start caring about abortion, because religiously, they didn't. Like, the Catholic Church was cool with it. Protestant religions were cool with it. It wasn't a thing. It was seen as a medical thing, not a political issue. White supremacists and Christians, Bob Jones University, Liberty University, etc., Jerry Falwell, those folks were mad that they couldn't segregate their schools and use religious freedom as a way to be segregationists. And so they had to find a different talking point. And so when he says, Talarico says 50 years, this movement has been going on, it's like, yes, this has been a slow moving coup here in America for 50 years. Absolutely. I'm on board. That's correct. Woohoo. Let's put a spotlight on that, because I think that's what a lot of people don't realize. They view this as a MAGA movement. They view this as a Trump thing, and Trump co-opted what was the Moral Majority, what was the religious right movement. The church, the religious right, thought they could use Trump, which they have fairly successfully, and Trump thought that he could use the church, which he has fairly successfully. Sort of a gross, unhealthy for democracy or a functioning country's utility, symbiotic relationship between those two. But yeah, so I'm like, yes, 50 years ago, Moral Majority, let's do it. Let's connect some dots. And he says, abortion, gay marriage, neither of those are in the Bible. Like, bro, if you're in the seminary, you should study the Bible more, because I can tell you abortion is absolutely in the Bible. There is a recipe for abortion. The Old Testament says, here's how to do an abortion, because the Bible does not say abortion is bad or wrong. The Bible has a recipe for it, because again, the Bible, written by dudes, and a long time ago, didn't have modern medicine. So they had to use dusty animal excrement and blood as a way to try and kill an unborn baby, as a punishment for perceived or assumed or wondered adultery. This is in the book of Numbers, chapter 5. Look it up. I mean, don't. It's not a good read, but if you don't believe me, that is where it is. I didn't go to seminary, but I was raised very, very conservative, evangelical, fundamentalist, evangelical. So yeah, Numbers 5. And it's like chapter 5, verses 22 to 29 or something like that. Why do I know this stuff? Because I don't know. I liked to find all the weird, gross, yucky stuff in the Bible. And now, as a contrarian person who is openly atheist and works with religious trauma, those are very easy things for me to pull. I did a lot of memory work when I was a kid. Not those verses. They didn't have us memorize that stuff. I also know, Ezekiel 23. So anyways, the Bible absolutely talks about abortion. And so again, this is disingenuous. This is political savvy. Again, that derails the conversation. That's not a politically winning strategy. And putting it in the context, I'm not holding it against Talarico that he said that. I am highlighting that, like, he's not really interested in dismantling systems of power if he's unwilling to engage with something like that. He wants to use his Christianity as something that Republicans who don't like Trump can go and vote for a Democrat, because at least he's one of the good ones. He's a Christian. But what Talarico is missing is that he's also presented himself as one of the good Christians. And like, you're not speaking truth to power at all. You're not dismantling the system. The system is baked into what your faith is all about, which is hierarchical thinking and in-group, out-group dynamics and power And as much as you're trying to say, I'll use the power for good, you're not dismantling the hierarchy. And so, you know, I was like 50 years ago, hell yeah, let's get into the religious right, name drop Paul Weyrich, talk about some of the direct through lines from the racist 1950s Christian movements to today. I did a 40-minute video about it a few weeks ago. It's not like hidden. It's just not like fun to talk about. People don't talk about it. Anyway, I don't know if I want to continue. I also like made such a face when he said like our Christians. Like, again, bro, you're not interested in changing things if you're building that in-group out-group dynamic. It is a politically savvy idea to bring people in. He's metaphorically putting his arm around Colbert and being like, us Christian guys, like Presbyterians and Catholics don't believe the same thing. You're not the same type of Christian. You wouldn't go to the same church. Again, these two figures might, but that's not the way that the church actually exists in the real world. And so it's like politically savvy, and I'm not like really hypercritical of it, other than that, like, again, this is not a revolutionary moment. The rest of the interview is politely criticizing the current people in power without criticizing the power structures in the first place. Right. And so he says some things that I agree with about church, separation of church and state. And he doesn't go far enough to talk about what would prevent that from being a problem in the future. He's just trying to go back to a way it was. And like, I think that way it was sort of mythical. For a long time, we've had a bunch of religious stuff where it doesn't belong in our country. He's not talking about dismantling that. He's just saying, look, I fought against this very bad bill that would have put the 10 Commandments in every Texas classroom. And like, that's great. But if your reasoning is the Bible tells me to love my neighbor, and so that's what I'm going to do. Well, like, the Bible is what got Mike Johnson here. And his understanding of the Bible says the 7 Mountains mandates means that white Christian dudes need to be in charge of all of the government. The Bible doesn't get to be this source of information that makes you make moral decisions. Because if it says what Mike Johnson says, and it says what Doug Wilson says, and it says what every cult leader who's ever used it as a recruitment tool says, then it doesn't get to be your progressive guiding light. That can't work. If it's so amorphous, if it can be used by all these different movements, it doesn't work, right? It doesn't work that way. And so I think the idea of progressive Christianity as progress is false. I'd go so far as to say it's hypocritical. And Colbert, middle finger to CBS, is funny. But again, like, not changing things. John Oliver doing, and again, like, I'm not expecting them to do more. Right? Like, I'm just acknowledging that, like, that's not what's going to save us. Comedians telling jokes isn't going to change things. That's not how systemic change happens. Systemic change happens when people form their own system in opposition to the authoritative system, right? Revolution isn't done by singular revolutionaries. Revolution is done by groups of people, because it takes groups of people to fight a system of people, these institutions. And so the idea here of, like, you know, I don't know, it's sort of our reactionary culture. It's sort of online culture of, like, there's just too much on, like, somebody gets a good zinger and we're like, that's the revolution. Like, I don't know, the lady who was out throwing lighter fluid on an ice warehouse is a revolution. And again, like, that's a singular person. I'm not highlighting that, but like, taking direct action is helpful to the revolution. I'm not dismissing comedy's ability to skewer those in power, to make their power seem less indestructible, to poke fun at and agitate some of these things. Again, I think that has a role, but it is not revolutionary in and of itself. And a politician who wants to get elected to continue to maintain the status quo is also not revolutionary. That is not enough. Both Crockett and Talarico in their debate did say they didn't say they would impeach Donald Trump, but they said there was enough to impeach him there, which again is candidate mode. Is maybe they very much want to impeach Donald Trump and think he should be impeached, and they're maybe not going to say that because they're running for Senate in Texas. I get that. So, but like, yeah, I mean, Ken Jennings posted it. A lot of people reposted it and shared it and have updated some version of it to say, like, whoever's going to run on holding the current regime to account and sending them to jail and having consequences for their very unconstitutional and illegal actions gets my vote. Like, yes, that's the starting point, right? Like, taxing billionaires is a starting point, right? But it is also maintaining the status quo. Having no billionaires would be much, much, much better. Saying a system that allows for billionaires to exist is beyond broken. We can't have that system. I would argue is where we need to be. It bums me out that we're not there. But that's not a huge surprise. Where Colbert's like not a leftist, right? He's liberal, but not leftist. And so, the Christianity is not a surprise there. I have a different look at me. I'm becoming a clip show. I'm not a show. This is why I don't do well, because I both loathe the algorithm and don't want to be internet famous. I would love to just be outdoors and enjoying 60-degree weather in Wisconsin in February, and then later fight the existential dread of what 60-degree weather in February in Wisconsin means. But here I am spending time on the internet with you, and here you are spending your time with me. So we're doing it. This is Anna Kasparian on I've Had It, a podcast which is lovely. Again, like, I'm not like, hey, everyone, listen to me. A lot of stuff that I talk about, I learned by reading other people who were smarter than me. And yeah, doing like a ton of therapy, both as a client myself, but also as a professional of 17 years. The things I learned from interacting with other people are great, but like the people who are talking about revolution consistently are Black and brown people. And the people who like I learn the most from and read the most from are women. The people I follow who are talking about decolonization tend to be Indigenous women, tend to be Black and brown women, tend to be people who are coming from other countries, who have done the work in other countries to fight oppressive regimes. So, I'm a white person. Colbert's white. The hosts of I've Had It are white. Like, again, a lot of times this is platforming ideas that we can get from other people, which is great. It's lovely to learn and use those things. Anna Kasparian is not white. Gosh, I hate how we talk about this stuff. And like, again, I'm obviously white. I'm from Wisconsin. I'm pretty pasty. It's still winter despite being 60 degrees outside. I hate like how normalized this stuff has become because we put a bigot into the White House and people are platforming Nick Fuentes. So like, this is a problem. But Kasparian is Armenian, from Reseda, California, right? So she's a citizen. She was born here. Armenian parents, lots of Armenian folks out in California. Shout out to those boys in System of a Down. One of them's a Trumper though, so not to him. But again, like people who are coming from a history of oppression, like who talk about the Armenian genocide, who amplify those marginalized voices, who speak up for people who don't have the power, like love all of that. In Reseda, California, shout out to PWG. I won't talk about pro wrestling. I already spent enough time talking about the Strangers with Candy. Anna Kasparian is a host of the Young Turks and like has also been on Young Turks when the Young Turks has moved far more conservative. They still identify as leftist, although Kasparian is like, I'm politically homeless. That just means you're a right winger and you don't like acknowledging that you're a right winger. So, but this is somebody who used to be progressive, used to be leftist, or said they were, and then as they got more money and or got criticism from the left, as they got more money, they turned more conservative because that's what happens. And then as they got criticism from actual leftists, they got mad and went more conservative. So here's somebody who some more accountability wants to maybe talk about some of the systems that Talarico, who's running for election, isn't going to get into. The ladies on I've Had It do a nice job of asking some of these harder hitting questions and calling out the bullshit as they see it. Again, middle-aged women who are frustrated with the system are also doing a lot of the heavy lift in our society for calling out bullshit. But this is Anna Kasparian, who used to claim to be a progressive, even to go so far as to say she was leftist. She's probably only ever a liberal, not really a true leftist. Not doing a purity test, just putting some context in. And let's hear what she has to say about good old Tucker Carlson. Shortcut. Hey, look at that.
Which I want to talk to you next. My next curiosity about you is I see you collab with Tucker Carlson a lot. And so I want you to tell me about that, because Tucker to me is a very dangerous person because he speaks to a lot of people in middle America that have extreme homophobia, extreme transphobia. And I have so many gay friends in Oklahoma that are bullied by their churches, their families, their governments. And he recently was saying like FAGGOT multiple times. And he is clear-eyed on Israel, but I feel like that his position on Israel is also wrapped in, this is my opinion, in some anti-Semitism the same way his homophobia is. And I wanted to get your take on that.
I don't think he's anti-Semitic. I don't at all, actually. In fact, he has even in the past like supported Zionism. But I think once he realizes how detrimental.
Sorry, to clarify, my clip there is from the Majority Report, which hopefully won't get taken down that way because they're clipping something else. I don't know how YouTube works. Majority Report. Actual leftists, if you want to engage with a media source that is at least more consistently than other things left and not just liberal or progressive. But so again, like, because I work with religious trauma, because I happen to have a hyper focus on the ties to Christianity, white supremacy, and neo-Nazis, being a Zionist is anti-Semitic, because the Zionist philosophy that Israel needs to be a country and all of the Jewish people from the diaspora need to go back to Israel is racist. Because again, a lot of white supremacists don't want Jewish people here. They want them in Israel because they don't like Jewish people. It's not because they support the country of Israel, and it's not because they support the tenets of Judaism. It's because they're racist. But Zionists, especially evangelicals, Christians who support the idea of Israel, those like Ted Cruz, who said, I grew up on the idea that Israel needs to be a country because the Bible says so, are missing the point that the Zionist idea is Israel needs to be a country so that Jesus can come back, so that Judgment Day can happen, in which he will send a bunch of the Jewish people to hell because they don't believe in him and they crucified him. Depends on how racist you want to get with it. Because again, I would argue the Protestant reformer like Martin Luther got pretty anti-Semitic and say not only would they go to hell because they don't believe in Jesus, but they would deserve to go to hell because they killed Jesus. I was raised Lutheran, so always fun to throw Marty Luther under the bus. But again, like, this is just an uneducated talking point to suggest this is, I think, not a lie. I think this is just disingenuous. It's hard to say if it's an outright lie or it's just like a lack of knowledge on the topic. Because again, if you weren't raised this way, it's hard to understand like Christianity as a death cult, not just for themselves, but for other people, that they want other people to be punished for their sins. They also want the end of the world to happen because they are under the assumption that they will get eternal paradise and everybody else will be punished, and that seems just to them. It's not. Eternal punishment for a finite crime is by definition amoral and unethical, but whatever. You can see the y'all need therapy shirt sort of behind the microphone. Jesus is crossed out. Y'all need Jesus crossed out. The therapy is written underneath it. So saying he used to be a Zionist, therefore he can't be anti-Semitic is false. And the majority report folks who are lovely and I support and watch their content pretty regularly come in and make a similar, although not informed by being raised fundamentalist evangelical perspective, and highlight that like Tucker is having conversation with Dick Fuentes. He's comfortable with white supremacy. He's comfortable with anti-Jewish, pro-genocide people. Just saying that Israel is conducting a genocide doesn't mean somebody's clear-eyed on Israel. It's should be a bare minimum to say that genocide is bad, with adding no caveats to that. That should be a thing we should all agree on. Not something Nick Fuentes agrees on, and Tucker Carlson platformed him for several hours. So again, I'm not picking on the I've Had It podcast ladies. They do a lot of great work, but Anna Kasparian being like progressive is like obviously not, right? And was she ever or whatever? I don't know. But again, we're lacking spaces where progressives, I think, are taking up a lot more airtime, quote unquote progressives who are really just the status quo. They are not necessarily interested in dismantling systems of power. They are not really critiquing where the power comes from. They're doing some sort of gestures towards billionaires are bad. They're doing some gestures towards like fascism is bad. But again, like, I don't know, Crockett, when she's in a Senate hearing or like a House, she's a House of Rep, when she's in Congress doing her job, she calls it out a lot better than I think on the sort of campaign trail. And I think that's just contextual. So I do tend to lean maybe that she is the more actual leftist, what progressive the word means, not what progressive the political party means. And that doesn't mean Talarico wouldn't be. He doesn't have as long of a time being in the House of Representatives and doesn't have sort of those viral moments of like calling Trump a pedophile. So again, I think I'm not voting in Texas, so it doesn't matter what I think. But either one is better than a Republican. And if we can flip Texas, that's like a big deal. And voting isn't going to save us if the people we keep voting for are status quo people, instead of we need to dismantle some of these old, outdated, promoting white supremacy, written for and by white supremacists, ideas that we hang on to, like the Electoral College. We need a brand new system of taxation, not just let's go back to this tax thing. We shouldn't have billionaires. And if you can't come out and say that, then you're probably not on the political left, right? Like, I don't know. This feels like the Overton window moving right if these are like progressive options. So, and again, I mean, Talarico is on the rise in theory. We'll see what happens with the Senate race. I don't think he goes away if he doesn't win this election. And it would be just a primary against Crockett. That would be the thing. And then he has to win, and either one of them will have to win still, which is in Texas, which is not a given in spite of the unpopularity of the current regime. And so we see him sort of progressing, maybe moving to the left, where Kasparian started on the left is moving right. And so I'm just using both of these figures as recent interviews that are sort of juxtaposed to like, yeesh, this is not what systemic change is going to look like. Neither of those people are using the language that is about accountability, that is about, even if you don't want to say revolution, like, it's hard to trust somebody who's so openly citing their Christianity as somebody who's going to dismantle systems of authority, because Christianity is itself a system of authority. And that's just having like a kinder, gentler power instead of dismantling the power structure that exists. And that doesn't excite me. And you can like James Talarico. Well, I love Stephen Colbert, right? Like it doesn't mean how dare you. It just is like the reality of it's hard when you're looking at the power structures and you're thinking systemically to get excited about these things. I'm not saying they're bad. It's not a purity test on are they leftist enough. I'm optimistic. I'm glad the video did well. I'm glad it happened that way. I love Stephen Colbert. I love the middle finger to the giant corporations that are running and owning our media. Would love to see CBS collapse and fall on its face and not be a thing anymore. And it would get bought up by a right-wing billionaire, which wouldn't be better, right? So like, you know, there's these bits of comeuppance and there's these ideas of sort of Schadenfreude and the ideas of like snippets of, haha, a bad thing happened to a bad person and that gets to make me feel good. But when we're actually sort of looking at like, is this systemic change? Like, no, it's not. It's not. So hopefully we'll get some revolutionaries come out and see the utility of abolish ICE, and we'll see the utility of leftist talking points and dismantling the systems. You know, in small ways it's there. Costco did not preemptively follow Trump's fascist takeover and get rid of DEI, and Costco's business is doing a lot better than Target or Walmart, who did go and dismantle DEI preemptively to try and appease Trump. And like, again, that's not like Costco is good. It's just like, yeah, there are bits of evidence, there are pieces where we can see, hey, the evidence is out there, and like the Waltons who own Walmart are not hurting, right? Target could collapse, become the new Kmart, and cease to exist. And there's a bunch of shitty people who made the decisions that being racist was okay at Target who will get millions of dollars in that collapse and be totally fine and not actually face any accountability. So, you know, it's not doom and gloom. There's momentum here. There's good things, but I think to course correct for the Overton window shifting right so hard, we do have to try and pull people left. So we'll see what happens. I'm trying to think. I feel like I had some other. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not a crazy fan of progressivism, and I'm certainly not a fan of progressive Christianity. But that's what I got. Hopefully this video makes sense if I have to cut some clips out. We'll see what happens. America. I am going to go enjoy the nice weather. I hope you can do something that also takes care of your mental wellness. I support that. That's the whole idea over here. Do something that prepares you for the marathon that is societal collapse. It's not a sprint. And organize. But, you know, take care of yourself. Take care of somebody else is how I wrap it, because that's how this thing called life works. Deuces. See y'all later.